Okay, what did I do with that thing? I made I made a video earlier today explaining little Casper the Ghost over here, but I don't know if I'm gonna upload that one. But anyway, I cracked my screen protector thingy. It must be right over the right over the lens camera side. So just Casper the Ghost sitting over there. I ordered a new one. I used to have a place not far from here where I get your phone repair, you know. They went out of business. So now I gotta figure it out for myself. I believe I've talked about this before. Where about boomers. I've complained about this before. It's been a while. And I understand younger people, like say the millennials, complaining about the boomers. I get it. You're always complaining about the people behind you. We did the same thing. But when someone complains about the boomers, I have to think of my parents. My parents are boomers. I'm Generation X. They're boomers. So that's my filter. So that's kind of what ticks me off. But I hear the things that are said about the boomer generation, how they hoard all the wealth. They've done nothing for the future generations. They didn't teach them anything. They didn't, it's all about them, narcissistic behavior and all this kind of stuff. And just terrible characteristics of this group, of which my parents are part of, okay? My parents are nothing like that. And as a kid growing up, after school, we just went to work. Our business was open till like 10 or 11 at night. And so we'd go there before we went home. So me and my sister, for the most part, we had friends at school, but really had not a lot of friends after school. Because we spent most of our time with our parents at the business, hanging out with boomers. And what's the other group? I can't think of them. I call them the World War II crowd. But we were raised around adults, a lot of adults. And those were our friends. I liked it. I look back, it was a great learning experience for me because it got just a different perspective. I mean, what am I going to learn from a kid my age? So when I hear people talk badly or poorly about the boomers, it really pisses me off. But maybe I just knew the good ones or some weird thing like that. But we spent a lot of time around adults as kids, and I never noticed these characteristics about the boomers. Like I said, I've not met everyone, so they're always telling us, do this, don't do that. You better be prepared for this. It's not always going to be this good or whatever. Blah. And they were always telling us as young kids, use your head, use common sense. Someday it's going to be like this, and make sure you get your education. And so when someone says, well, they didn't care about the future generation, or they didn't invest anything in them, I totally got just the opposite out of that. If I did anything, any time I might have rose above my lazy self, it was because a boomer was pushing me, and not necessarily my parents. There's a couple of big channels, guys with millions of subscribers, that are, I can see younger kids doing this, but guys that are my age. They're actually like either real close to my age or maybe a year or two younger. And they go hard on the boomers. Oh, they've done this and they've done that. Why don't they just die? And I'm just terrible. And then after listening to them long enough in their podcast, I realized what the problem was. They had shitty parents. Their parents either abused them or their parents were alcoholic addicts of some other. They had terrible parents. So their experience of boomers were in their own personal life was terrible. They had bad parents. And I mean, they're open about that. Their parents were terrible. Whereas my parents, who are still, amongst us, still living, thank God, are great people. There is nothing that my parents ever did that did not include me and my sister. There's no decision they ever made that wasn't about either improving our situation, especially for me and my sister. Um, my dad constantly, you know why we do it this way? We do it this way because of this and that. If we did it this way, we'd be in a lot of trouble. So we do it like this. So don't, this is how we do it. My whole life was filled with that. My dad would stop the car in traffic, pointing out some drunk on the side of the road, passed out or whatever the case is. You see that? You see that? You know what that's from? And I'd get the whole spiel about this guy. My whole life was filled with that. I still drank for a time. But as far as any time my parents, made some financial decision or they were doing something, my dad says, we're collecting these, these are assets we're purchasing here, whether it's land or whatever we're doing, and someday you're going to have to deal with this. So here's how we do this. This is, this is what escrow is, and then you got to pay this jerk, and then you got to pay that so-and-so to come do the inspection. But we're getting robbed the whole way. So, at what point when you got this asset, you have a lot in it because you paid through the nose for it. And total education, it was never politically correct, but, even my mom, they were schooling us all the time. And then everything they always did, if anything my parents did, my dad was never left the wife and kids home so he could go hang out with his friends. If my dad had friends to go to, we went with him. It was a package deal. Everything my parents did was with their kids. We went wherever they went, we went. And they didn't have a whole lot of friends, people they hung out with. That was kind of maybe when they were younger. They had us very young, but we were very tight knit. But to hear people harp on the boomers after thinking about my parents, that kind of pisses me off. And a lot of the boomers that I grew up with were all good people, and they were all very conscientious of what me or my sister were doing. And back then, had no problem. Now you might not say something to someone else's kids, but those people back then, they flat tell you, hey, you're being a jackass. Straighten up. Because they saw pretty much all kids as an investment. But to hear these people say how, they don't do anything for the generation. If anything, the fact that I probably would have put off buying any piece of property, getting a mortgage my entire life because they didn't want the pain in the butt. I said, what a pain in the ass, just rent, whatever, the case is. And it was my dad that forced me, said, you got an opportunity here, you got to take advantage of this. And that was a long story, but I bought my first house that way. Him nagging at me, you better take advantage of this, you got an opportunity over here. And the opportunity was a house that could not sell. It was appraised at about $80,000, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, track home. It was appraised at $80,000. The guy owed $109,000 on it. And my dad's, and this guy who worked for us wanted someone to take over the payments because he got a better job out of town. And the homes, you couldn't give them away. No one was buying homes. This was in the mid-90s. I said, let me get this straight, Dad. I didn't have to put any down payment. There was some fees, about $2,500 in fees. But I said, let me get this straight. There's a house that cannot be sold. The market is so bad. It's appraised at 80. The guy owes 107 on it. It's like a bad car loan. And you want to take over the payments? He says, trust me, you got to live somewhere. And he was right. 10 years later, I sell that home and I walk away with $162,000. Profited on that thing. Crazy. But it was like that. My parents, everything my parents ever did was for us. We had our family business, but they'd always said, someday this might be yours, and, if you choose to do this, and, well, here's how we do it. And we were educating us all the time. They could never say that they could easily say that they sacrificed everything for us the whole time. And it's true. So I can't see enough good about my parents. And as far as the boomers that I was raised around, it was a very good generation for me. But I had to think about this. These guys that are my age complaining about boomers, the parallel that they all have, what they have in common, was crappy parents. And so they're gonna, they paint the whole entire generation as bad. which maybe the majority of them are. I have no idea, but that just wasn't my experience. I was very fortunate, very blessed to be born of those two people. I'm very thankful for that. Anyhow, love you. God bless.